Chapter 1. The sky above Earth shifted as the Xephar fleet dropped from the stars. Their motherships loomed like titans, casting dark shadows over the planet, cutting off sunlight in vast stretches. In the command center beneath New York City, the atmosphere was heavy with tension. Earth's military leaders and scientists were huddled around a large round table, the glow of the holoscreens illuminating their weary faces. They had been expecting something like this, but the reality felt far heavier. Arya Carson stood at the back of the room, her arms crossed, eyes scanning the data feed. The Xephar, a race of hyper-intelligent and technologically advanced aliens, had been watching humanity for decades. Now their patience had run out. Earth, the voice boomed, so cold, so assured. We have decided to offer you a challenge. Fail, and your species will be erased. Show us your worth. The message echoed through the comms, resonating in Arya's chest. She could almost feel the weight of the words, like a physical blow. For the past century, humanity had fought to stay relevant in the galactic community. Each victory, each loss, another lesson in survival. But this was different. The Xephar weren't interested in alliances, trade, or diplomacy anymore. They had come to pass judgment. One of the generals at the table, a tall man with a scar across his face, slammed his fist on the table, the sound sharp and final. We can't just sit here. We need a plan now. Arya's thoughts moved faster than her heart could keep up. Her mind raced, calculating the odds, the risks, the choices. Her fingers drummed anxiously on the edge of the holoscreen in front of her. There was no time for hesitation. Earth didn't have the military might or the technology to fight the Xephar head-on. They had only one option: ingenuity. And there was one person on Earth who could turn the tide. Arya Carson. She pushed her way forward, her voice cutting through the room's static-filled murmur. We build something they've never seen before. A few eyes snapped to her, the room falling silent. Her words hung in the air, uncertain yet defiant. The general looked at her with narrowed eyes. Something what? They've got weapons that could obliterate us in seconds. We can't just... Arya cut him off, her voice unwavering. I know what they've got. I've studied their technology. They're faster, smarter, more advanced, but they don't understand us. They've never faced us in a fight where our survival depends on something more than firepower. The general raised an eyebrow. So what? You think we can outsmart them with a shiny new toy? Not a toy, Arya replied. A weapon. A symbol. We need something that will show them exactly what humanity is capable of. We need a machine that embodies everything we've built, everything we can create when we're backed into a corner. A long silence followed as her words settled. Everyone in the room knew the stakes, but the idea of creating a new weapon, something on par with the Xephar's might, felt impossible. Yet, as Arya stood there, she saw a glimmer of hope flicker in the eyes of the scientists and engineers around the table. The general exhaled sharply. And you're confident you can do this? Arya didn't flinch. We have 30 days. That's all I need. It wasn't confidence she offered, but a promise. And she knew she couldn't afford to fail. The next 24 hours were a blur of plans, calculations, and sleepless nights. Arya found herself alone in a dimly lit lab, surrounded by screens and blueprints. A massive machine hummed softly in the background, its frame starting to take shape, though its purpose was still unclear. But in Arya's mind, it was already real. The image of what they needed, what would save them, formed piece by piece. Her hands moved with a practiced rhythm as she made adjustments to the schematics. The team she had assembled was made up of the brightest minds in robotics and artificial intelligence. They had just one task: to create a robot capable of holding its ground against an alien force unlike any Earth had ever seen. But it couldn't just be a weapon. It had to be something that could learn, adapt, and surprise the Xephar in ways they never expected. Her thoughts were interrupted when Dr. Lorne, a neuropsychologist and AI specialist, entered the room. He was a tall man with thin glasses and the air of someone who was always thinking, always calculating. He walked over to the desk, eyes flicking over the designs with a skeptical gaze. "You think this is going to work?" he asked, his tone flat but not dismissive. "I don't think it's going to work," Arya replied, pausing her work for a moment to meet his gaze. "I know it will." Dr. Lorne raised an eyebrow. "You're building a robot that can learn to outthink the Zephyr. That's ambitious." "Ambition is all we have," she said, a fire lighting up in her eyes. "We can't match their firepower, but we can match their adaptability. We'll design an AI that's constantly evolving, capable of reacting to whatever they throw at it. The key isn't brute strength. It's ingenuity. We've been underestimated for far too long. This time, we make them see what we can do." Dr. Lorne gave a half-smile, his skepticism momentarily giving way to respect. "All right then. Let's build a machine that even the Zephyr won't see coming." Arya's team dove into their work with renewed vigor. Every day, they pushed forward, learning from their mistakes and improving on the fly. The prototype took shape, taller than a man, built for agility, armed with a weaponry system that could adapt in real time. But it was more than just a fighter. It was a mirror of humanity's willpower and creativity. On the final day before the deadline, Arya stood alone in the control room, watching the first full test of the robot. The mechanical limbs whirred to life, its systems clicking into place as it powered up. She felt her pulse quicken, her nerves stretching thin. If it failed now, they were all doomed. The robot moved, a little clumsy at first, unsure of its own strength. But as it adjusted, it began to make calculated moves, its AI processing each action, learning from each mistake. Arya's heart pounded in her chest. Come on, come on. And then, it did something unexpected. The robot adapted, its movements becoming fluid, almost human in their unpredictability. It was learning, evolving, just as Arya had planned. A smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. This was their chance. As she watched the robot stand tall, ready for the challenge ahead, Arya couldn't help but think of the Zephyr. They had underestimated humanity before. Now they were going to learn just how dangerous that mistake could be. And Earth was ready to prove it. Chapter 2. The air in the lab felt thick, as though it was holding its breath. The whir of machines, the clicking of keyboards, and the hum of 1,000 ideas merging into one singular vision filled the room. Arya Carson stood at the center of it all, a whirlwind of motion, her hands moving faster than her mind could process. Each keystroke, each schematic revision, was a step closer to their salvation or their doom. The pressure pressed on her chest like an invisible weight. The team was working furiously, the sound of their voices occasionally cutting through the noise. Dr. Lorne's deep, methodical voice floated over the constant hum. We're pushing the limits of everything we've got. The AI is unpredictable. It's learning faster than we can anticipate. Arya barely glanced up from the holographic blueprints she was adjusting. That's the point. We need it to be unpredictable. The Zephyr won't expect that. I'm just saying, we're operating on the edge of what's possible. One mistake, and this whole thing could backfire. She turned sharply to face him, her eyes fierce, unwavering. If we don't take risks now, we won't have a future. Keep pushing. Lorne hesitated but nodded, returning to his station. The AI's neural interface had been integrated into the robot's central system, giving it the ability to learn from its environment in real time. But it wasn't perfect. Not yet. Every test revealed flaws, small ones, like the robot's tendency to overestimate its physical strength or its hesitation when confronted with unexpected movement. They had to fix them all. Arya stepped over to a large console, her fingers gliding over the interface, manipulating data, watching the robot's performance metrics stream in real time. The robotic frame stood across the room, its body covered in thin sheets of metal that gleamed in the fluorescent light. The machine had a human-like form, not bulky or slow, but sleek, designed for agility. It wasn't just about brute force. It was about unpredictability, intelligence, and most importantly, adaptability. This doesn't look right, murmured Dr. Perez, one of the younger engineers, her face pinched with frustration. She stood over the robot's diagnostic table, fingers tracing over a series of graphs. It's making the same mistake again. It's locking up whenever it encounters a slight angle difference in terrain. It's not learning as fast as we need it to. Arya approached, her brow furrowed. Adjust the sensory inputs. It needs to recognize that variance before it happens, not after. We can't wait for it to react. It needs to predict. Perez typed furiously, adjusting the sensory calibration. The robot's movements were jerky on the screen as it tested the terrain model, stepping over uneven ground, navigating obstacles. It paused, recalculated, and then moved forward. Still not perfect, but better. Every improvement brought them closer to success. Better, Arya muttered, watching the screen intently. Her fingers twitched in impatience. Let's run it again. Harder terrain. I want it to be ready for everything. There were no more words as the team fell into a rhythm, working with an almost automatic precision. They were all focused on the same goal, humanity's survival. With each test, Arya saw it, a flicker of brilliance. The robot was beginning to think for itself. It was no longer just a machine responding to input, it was anticipating, adapting. The clock on the wall ticked down, less than 2 weeks before the showdown with the Xephar. Time was slipping away, but the sense of urgency only made the team more determined. They couldn't afford to fail. Not when the eyes of the galaxy were watching. 3 days later, the robot was ready for its first real-world test. They had moved it outside the lab, to an isolated desert testing site far from the prying eyes of the world. The sand whipped around them, the sky a dry, cloudless expanse of blue. This would be the first time the robot would face an environment that wasn't carefully controlled. The uneven ground, shifting winds, and the blinding sunlight would push it beyond what they could simulate. Arya stood at the edge of the testing area, her hands clenched into fists. Dr. Lorne joined her, his expression unreadable as they watched the robot power up. It stood tall now, its form casting a long shadow on the desert floor. The light gleamed off its surface, and for a moment, it seemed almost human, almost alive. "You ready?" Lorne asked, his voice low. "I've never been more ready," Arya said, the words coming out almost as a whisper. She didn't need to look at him to know he didn't share her confidence. He was the cautious one, always weighing the risks. The robot took its first step onto the sand, its movements hesitant at first. It stumbled. Arya's heart skipped a beat as she watched it regain balance and adjust. It was learning. Run the environment test. "I want to see how it handles the obstacles," Arya instructed. A series of barriers rose from the sand, randomly placed, uneven, and unpredictable. The robot's sensors detected each obstacle in real time, calculating the best course of action, and then, almost effortlessly, it began to navigate them. Jumping over gaps, sliding underneath, twisting around, responding faster than anyone could have expected. Each move more graceful than the last. The robot's AI was evolving. "You're watching this, right?" Arya said to Lorne, barely able to contain the excitement in her voice. "I'm watching," he replied, though there was a tinge of disbelief in his tone. "It's actually working." But then, the unthinkable happened. One of the obstacles, a large boulder, rolled into the path of the robot, shifting in the wind, creating an unexpected challenge. The robot froze for a split second. It hesitated. Arya's heart sank. No, no, no. But then the machine did something unexpected. It recalculated. The robot's arms shifted, its frame contorted, and with a quick movement, it launched itself forward, leaping over the boulder in a perfectly executed jump. Arya's breath caught in her throat. It wasn't just reacting. It was predicting. Was thinking. "I think we've got it," Lorne said, his voice finally breaking through the shock. "This thing, it's not just adapting. It's evolving." Arya nodded, a smile tugging at her lips. "We've got one shot, Lorne. This thing has to be perfect. It's not just a weapon. It's humanity's statement. This is how we fight back." The tests continued into the night, and though the robot still had moments of uncertainty, Arya could feel it in her gut. It was learning. It was more than just a machine now. It was the answer to everything they'd ever feared, the thing that could finally change the tide. But time was running out. The countdown had begun. With only days left, Aria's team worked tirelessly to perfect every detail. There was no room for error. The Xephar were coming, and they would show no mercy. But they would also see, without a doubt, that humanity was not to be underestimated. And Aria? She knew, deep down, that they had already won the first battle, the battle of ingenuity. Now, it was time to make sure the robot was ready to face the ultimate challenge. Chapter 3. The barren landscape of Mars stretched out before Aria Carson like an unforgiving mirror. She stood on the edge of the battlefield, watching the colossal, gleaming ships of the Xephar fleet hanging in the sky, their shadows creeping over the red planet's dusty surface. The sun was a distant, cold circle in the sky, offering little warmth to those below. The stakes of this battle felt like the weight of an entire civilization's future, and Aria felt every ounce of that pressure pressing down on her chest. The countdown had begun. In less than an hour, Earth's champion, a robot built on human ingenuity, would face the Zephar's best warriors in a contest that would decide the fate of the planet. Aria wasn't sure what she expected, but standing here now, with the alien fleet looming overhead, the fear of failure was almost suffocating. Behind her, a group of Earth's top scientists and military leaders gathered. Their faces were all tight with the same anxiety, the same uncertainty. They knew what was riding on this, and they knew the odds were slim. The Xephar didn't just have superior technology, they had centuries of experience, and they had never been defeated. Aria's gaze flicked to the robot, still in its final preparations on the opposite side of the battlefield. It stood silent, its gleaming form bathed in the red light of Mars' twin moons. The robotic figure was sleek, agile, designed to be an unpredictable force. It wasn't the strongest nor the fastest, but it had something the Xephar hadn't anticipated: humanity's unique ability to adapt. Beside her, General Hayes watched the robot with a scowl etched on his face. "You're sure this thing can hold its own?" Aria didn't hesitate. It's not just about brute strength. It's about thinking outside the box, adapting, learning, making decisions that no machine would normally make. The Xephar won't know what hit them. Hayes crossed his arms, his jaw tight. "That's the theory. Let's hope it works." Before Aria could respond, a sharp voice crackled through her earpiece. "Commander Carson, the Xephar are ready. They demand you begin immediately." Aria took a deep breath.
There was no more time for second-guessing.
This was it. She turned to face the team behind her, seeing the fear and hope in their eyes. It wasn't just her responsibility now. The weight of an entire species was resting on all of them. "We're ready," she said, her voice steady. "Let's show them what humanity can do." The battlefield was set, and the silence before the storm was deafening. The Earth robot was positioned in the center of the arena, its body poised, ready for action. The Zephar's champion stood opposite, a towering war machine, gleaming black armor, sharp edges, and a presence that sent a chill down Aria's spine. It was beautiful in its alien, terrifying perfection. A calculated force, a testament to the Zephar's prowess. The battlefield itself had been designed for one purpose: to test the combatants to their limits. The announcer's voice echoed across the field, a cold, alien sound. "This is the final test. The Earth champion faces the might of the Xephar Empire. Let the battle begin." The signal was given, and the ground beneath Aria's feet seemed to vibrate as the two machines surged forward. The Xephar machine moved with terrifying precision, its sleek form cutting through the terrain like a predator. It was fast, efficient, its energy shields flashing as it powered through the arena. But Aria wasn't focused on the Xephar machine. Her eyes were locked on the robot, the Earth's champion. It didn't rush. Instead, it calculated, taking its first step with deliberate care, as if testing the ground beneath it. "Come on," Aria muttered under her breath.
"Think.
Move." For a moment, the robot hesitated, then it launched itself into action. It darted to the side, evading the first strike of the Xephar machine. The Zephar's weaponry struck the ground where the robot had been just a second before, sending a plume of dust into the air. Aria's heart raced. The robot was moving. It was adapting just as it had been designed to. It wasn't perfect, but it was learning. Come on, keep it up, Arya urged softly into the microphone, not sure if anyone could hear her. On the battlefield, the Xephar machine's next strike was faster, more brutal. It unleashed a wave of energy that crackled in the air, aimed directly at the robot. The Earth machine had nowhere to run, no time to evade. Then, in a move that startled everyone, the robot did something completely unexpected. It used the terrain. It launched itself into a sharp roll, ducking under the attack, then springing back up with blinding speed. The Xephar's weapon missed by inches. It's learning, Arya whispered, a surge of hope flooding her chest. The robot wasn't just responding anymore. It was anticipating, evolving in the middle of the fight. The Xephar machine, however, wasn't about to be outmaneuvered so easily. With a low growl of its engines, it charged, unleashing a series of devastating blows, trying to land a direct hit. Each strike landed with the force of a small explosion, shaking the ground beneath their feet. Arya clenched her fists. Her mind raced. The robot was dodging, but there was only so much time before the Xephar would corner it. She needed the AI to push harder, to adapt quicker. "Come on, think faster," she muttered. The robot stumbled, its movements becoming more erratic as the Xephar machine closed in. Arya could see the strain on the machine systems. It was starting to fail under pressure. The AI was making decisions too slowly. It wasn't fast enough to outpace the Xephar's relentless assault. But then, just when it seemed like all hope was lost, something incredible happened. The robot shifted its approach. It didn't try to outrun the Xephar's machine. Instead, it feigned a slip, deliberately stumbling in a way that made the Xephar's machine overestimate its advantage. As the Xephar machine moved in for a final strike, the robot rolled forward and, with precision, grabbed a piece of debris, a large metal rod, and swung it, slamming it into the Xephar's machine's core. There was a sharp crack of metal, followed by a high-pitched screech as the Xephar's machine faltered, its shields flickering in and out of existence. The force of the blow sent it stumbling backward, losing its balance. The audience, both human and alien, held their breath. The Xephar machine regained its stance but was visibly damaged. The battle wasn't over, but Arya could feel the shift in momentum. "That's it," Arya breathed, her voice full of disbelief and awe. "It's working." The Xephar's champion roared in fury, now clearly on the defensive. It launched a barrage of firepower in desperation, but the Earth robot moved with fluidity, responding with quick evasions, learning, adapting to each new attack. The two machines were locked in a deadly dance, each strike met with calculated precision, each movement pushing the boundaries of what was possible. It wasn't just a fight, it was humanity's defiance in the face of annihilation. The crowd watched, their eyes wide. No one had expected this. Earth wasn't just fighting for survival anymore, it was fighting to make its mark, to show the Xephar and every alien race watching that humanity had something they couldn't predict. Something they couldn't control. And that, Arya realized, was their greatest weapon. Chapter for the battlefield. Once a vast, dusty expanse under Mars' dim, unforgiving sun, had transformed into a battleground of shattered metal and splintered rock. The two machines, Earth's robot and the Xephar's war machine, were locked in a brutal, relentless fight, each strike more vicious than the last. Arya stood at the command station, watching the live feeds as sweat beaded on her brow. Every move of the robot, every second it remained standing, felt like a fragile miracle. On the screen, the robot staggered, its systems flickering. It had taken damage, but it was still moving, still adapting. The Xephar machine, though far superior in raw power and size, had been outwitted, outmaneuvered in ways that no one had thought possible. But Arya knew it was not over yet. Not by a long shot. "Report." Arya snapped into the comms, her voice clipped. She could feel the tension in her gut, her mind racing as she processed every detail, every small movement of the robot. "Energy levels at 75%, Dr. Lorne's voice came through, calm but strained. "The robot's adaptive AI is holding up well, but it's struggling with a constant power drain. It's using more energy than anticipated." Aria's mind raced, running calculations as she stared at the battlefield. The robot's AI had learned to outthink the Zephyr's war machine, but there was a catch. The robot's energy reserves were finite, and each evasive move, each calculated strike, drained it faster than expected. They had accounted for this, but in the heat of battle, with the Zephyr relentless and unforgiving, every second counted. "Can we recalibrate the power distribution?" Arya asked, her voice tight. "Working on it," Lorne responded. "But it's a risky move, Carson. If we divert too much power to the shields, the weapon systems will be compromised." Arya didn't need to hear more. She could already see the Zephyr machine preparing another devastating attack. Its massive frame lunged forward, closing the distance between them. The Earth robot had barely enough time to react, its movement sluggish, its energy reserves dipping dangerously low. "Come on," Arya muttered, clenching her fists. "Come on." The Zephyr machine released another burst of firepower, energy blasts that tore into the ground, sending plumes of dust and debris into the air. The Earth robot moved just in time, but not without cost. The blast clipped its shoulder, sending a shockwave through its frame. A series of sparks erupted from the robot's damaged components. "Status update," Arya demanded, her throat tight. "Critical damage to the left arm actuator," Perez reported, her voice high with tension. "The robot's mobility is reduced by 25%. Arya's heart skipped. Time was running out. She knew they couldn't keep dodging forever. The Zephyr machine wasn't just a war machine, it was a symbol of everything the Zephyr believed they could crush. And Earth was barely holding on. The robot's movements had slowed, and Arya could see the hesitation in its actions. But then, something changed. With a low, mechanical groan, the robot surged forward, darting under the next barrage of fire from the Zephyr machine. The AI had adapted again, calculating the pattern of the attacks, predicting the Zephyr's next move. It didn't just evade, it struck. The robot's remaining arm swung around with terrifying precision, and the weapon embedded in its palm, a jagged, gleaming shard of alien metal, lashed out. The Zephyr machine staggered, the unexpected strike landing squarely in its side. Sparks flew, and for a brief moment, the machine froze, as though caught off guard by the human ingenuity it had so confidently underestimated. "Did it just?" Lorne's voice cracked with disbelief. "It did," Arya replied, her heart pounding. For the first time in the fight, the Zephyr war machine looked vulnerable. The Earth robot, battered but still alive, seized the moment. It didn't pause. It didn't hesitate. It moved with a fluidity that stunned even Arya, twisting and turning, dancing around the enemy machine like it was something far smaller and more agile. The Earth robot's AI had made its decision. It was time to finish this. "Target the core," Arya shouted into the comms. "That's where the weak point is. Go for the power node." The robot's movements were deliberate now, every action a calculated risk. It ducked under a heavy strike, using its remaining strength to twist the Zephyr machine's arm away and deliver a punishing blow directly to its energy core. The collision was explosive, a burst of light that illuminated the entire battlefield. Arya's breath caught in her throat. The Zephyr war machine stumbled, smoke pouring from the wound. The shields flickered and sputtered, failing to keep up with the robot's relentless assault. The moment of weakness was more than enough. With a final, deafening crack, the Earth robot drove its jagged weapon deep into the Zephyr machine's core. The machine shuddered violently, its systems overloading as it crumpled to the ground with an earth-shaking crash. It was over. The silence that followed was deafening. No one moved. Arya stood frozen, her eyes wide as she watched the flickering remains of the Zephyr machine lying motionless in the dust. The Earth robot, though battered and damaged, stood victorious, its frame swaying slightly as it powered down. "Did we?" Lorne's voice broke through the stillness. "Did we actually win?" Arya couldn't speak. She just stared at the robot. It had done it. They had done it. On the screens, the Zephyr fleet hovered in the sky, still silent, still unmoving. The battle had been won, but the true victory, Arya knew, was yet to come. The entire galaxy was watching, and the Xephar would not forget this. But neither would humanity. The human delegates on the battlefield remained quiet for a long moment, taking in the magnitude of the event. Then, the announcer's voice echoed once more, this time with a tone that was unmistakably laced with both disbelief and awe. The Earth champion has won. The Xephar Empire acknowledges humanity's power. Victory belongs to Earth. Arya didn't hear the words. All she could hear was the hum of the robot's cooling systems as it powered down. A wave of exhaustion crashed over her, but it wasn't just physical fatigue. It was the realization that Earth had proven something far beyond the battle itself. Humanity had shown the galaxy that they were no longer just a species to be dismissed. They were a force to be reckoned with. She exhaled sharply and let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. The weight of the moment pressed on her, but there was something else now, a flicker of hope. It was a small victory, yes, but it was the start of something much larger. Arya looked at the robot, her creation. For the first time since the challenge had begun, she allowed herself to smile. They had won. Chapter 5. The war machines had fallen silent. The once crowded Martian battlefield, filled with the sounds of battle, now stood still under the dim light of Mars' twin moons. The Earth robot, damaged and battle-worn, stood victorious in the center of the field. The dust that had risen in the wake of the fight still hung in the air, thick and choking, but in its midst, the robot stood tall. The Xephar war machine lay in ruin at its feet, the jagged weapon of Earth still embedded in its core. Arya Carson stood at the command center, her eyes locked on the large screen in front of her, her heart still pounding from the adrenaline of the battle. The image on the screen showed the aftermath, human and alien forces alike stunned by the turn of events. The victory, once unthinkable, had been claimed, but the reality of the situation was beginning to settle in. The silence in the command room felt heavier than ever. There were no cheers, no celebrations, only the sound of hushed breaths as the significance of the moment began to sink in. Arya's fingers rested on the edge of the console, her grip tight, her knuckles white. She had led her team through the unthinkable, designing a machine that could face the might of the Xephar and come out on top. But now, as the weight of their triumph settled on her shoulders, she felt a sense of unease. "We did it," Lorne said, breaking the silence, his voice barely above a whisper. "We actually did it." Arya didn't answer immediately. She wasn't sure what to say. Part of her wanted to feel the rush of triumph, but there was something else, something that gnawed at her insides. The Xephar may have been defeated today, but she knew better than anyone that the real battle had only just begun. "Did we?" Arya's voice was soft, reflective. "Did we really win? Or did we just show the galaxy that we're willing to fight for our survival?" Lorne looked at her, sensing the shift in her demeanor. He stepped closer. "What do you mean?" "The Xephar are a symbol, Lorne. They're not just a military force. They represent everything in this galaxy that sees us as insignificant, something to be conquered, wiped out, ignored. Today we proved them wrong. But the real question is, what comes next?" Lorne paused, processing her words. "I don't think anyone expected us to win today, not even the Xephar. But you're right. We've made our mark. No one's going to look at us the same way again." Arya's eyes flicked back to the screen, where the alien fleet still hovered in the sky, its massive ships floating like dark clouds. There was no immediate retaliation, no sudden eruption of violence. For now, the Xephar were quiet. But silence, she knew, was only temporary. There was a storm brewing on the horizon. The atmosphere in the command room shifted as the first representatives of the Xephar Empire arrived, their figures looming in the doorway, silent and imposing. Their leader, Commander Xephar, stepped forward, his gaze piercing, cold. The air thickened with tension as the two sides faced each other, humanity, a fledgling force in the galaxy, and the Xephar, once thought to be untouchable. Arya stood tall, meeting Xelthar's gaze without flinching. The defeat of his machine had been a blow to his pride, a reminder that the Xephar were not invincible. Yet, in the depths of his eyes, she could see something else, the flicker of uncertainty. You've made your point. Xelthar's voice was smooth, almost indifferent. You've proven your ability to survive. But understand this, human. This war is far from over. This victory means nothing in the grand scheme of things. Arya took a slow, steadying breath. I never expected it to. But today, we showed you what we're capable of. And trust me, you're not the only ones with an army. This isn't just about power anymore. It's about who we are. It's about survival. Xelthar's eyes narrowed. You think this survival will be enough to save you from what's coming? The galaxy is vast. Your species is small and fragile. You can't fight what's inevitable. Arya stepped forward, her resolve hardening. We don't have to fight it all at once, Xelthar. But today, humanity's message was clear. We're not just pawns to be moved around. We're players. And we'll stand our ground. Xelthar regarded her for a long moment, the silence stretching between them. Then, with a dismissive gesture, he turned. We will meet again, human. But know this, you've made your bed. You will lie in it. He turned and walked out of the room, leaving Arya standing there, a sense of finality hanging in the air. His words rang in her ears, but she didn't let them penetrate the calm she was forcing herself to hold on to. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. The next few hours were a blur of debriefings, discussions, and the meticulous process of assessing the damage. The Earth robot, though victorious, had suffered significant wear and tear. Its systems were taxed to their limit. But it had held up. It had fought and survived when no one thought it would. Arya watched as her team worked, repairing what they could, running diagnostics and brainstorming ways to improve the design. They had done the impossible, but now the hard part came, keeping their momentum going. Later, as the final debriefing concluded, Arya found herself alone in the lab, staring at the robot, her creation. The room was quiet, save for the hum of the system still running, the soft clicks of the diagnostic tools. She placed her hand on the cool metal surface, feeling the vibrations of the machine beneath her fingertips. This was her victory, her legacy. But in the back of her mind, she knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. You did it, she whispered to the robot, a soft smile tugging at her lips. But we've got more work to do. Back in the command room, General Hayes stood at the front, addressing the gathered leaders, his voice firm and resolute. Today, humanity proved something no one thought possible. But make no mistake, the Xephar are not going to let this go. They will come back. And we need to be ready. Arya entered the room, her presence drawing the attention of the group. She nodded to Hayes, but her gaze lingered on the faces of the leaders around the table. We'll be ready, she said, her voice steady and unwavering. This victory proves one thing. We're not just a species to be disregarded. We're capable of more than anyone could have imagined. Hayes looked at her, a flicker of admiration in his eyes. That's why you're in charge of this now. The next phase starts with you. Arya met his gaze, her shoulders straightening as the weight of the responsibility settled over her. She had led them this far, but there was so much more to do. The Xephar would return, and humanity would need to be stronger, faster, smarter than ever before. For the first time since the battle began, Arya allowed herself a moment of quiet triumph. They had done the impossible. They had proved their worth. But as she looked around the room at the faces of those who stood with her, she knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. And humanity, against all odds, was ready for whatever came next.